Hi, this is Stacia, and we're going to look at a position given to me in the book Mating the Castle King by Grandmaster Danny Gormally. And this position features the bishop and knight, and I want to go ahead and read to you what he says about this position. So he says, one of the most difficult mates for the amateur player to master is the endgame with bishop and knight against a bare king. In the middle game, though, the bishop and knight often work beautifully well together and may sometimes deliver a snap mate, as in this example. Okay, and we're going to look at this, but then I'm going to put up a tactics puzzle, an attacking one from a real game, and we're going to look at how this very pattern plays a role in that puzzle. So if you haven't found the answer, you should pause your video and do that, but I'm going to go ahead. The correct move here is knight f5 check, and this is very beautiful. Okay, so the first thing to notice is that this is a discovery on the king, so the king is in check, so there's no time to take the knight, and the king must move. You also cannot play f6 because it's a double check, so anytime there's a double check, the king must move. So he would love to come outside and try to escape, but notice how the knight's covering that square. He would love to maybe go here so that he's not victim to any future knight checks on h6, but he can't do that. So the only move is king g8. And now we have the move knight h6, and that's checkmate. So that's beautiful. So one thing you want to know, and this happens in that exact endgame that Danny Gormally mentioned, is that when the bishop can control its square, which in this case is a dark square bishop, so when it's controlling the dark squares and the knight's controlling the light squares, this is extra powerful. And notice that the rook is actually playing a role in this mate as well, because if the rook wasn't there, the king could escape to e8. But with the rook there, that's not possible. So there you go, very beautiful. Knight f5 check, king here, and checkmate. Now you may have been tempted to play the move knight e6. This is also a discovered check and a double check. But the problem with this one is, although it wins the rook, we need to be mindful of, well, first of all, it's a blunder because we have checkmate the other way. But you need to be mindful here because after king g8, we can take this rook. That's true. But now white only has a bishop and a king against 3 connected passed pawns. Now the computer's telling me this is a draw. Okay, but black has the winning chances here with these 3 pawns. And white will never win because white doesn't have insufficient material, or doesn't have sufficient material to mate. Okay, so let's look at the example. Okay, so here is a position from the game Brady vs. O'Brien, played in Dublin 1992. This is tactics puzzle number 24 from the book Mating the Castle King. And here there's a devastating move that was played in the game. And so it's white to move, and if you'd like to pause your video and find it yourself, go ahead and do so now. Okay, and the move is actually knight to b5. This is an amazing move. It's a discovery on the queen, and it has some threats that have to do with the bishop and knight coordination happening here. But before we analyze further, I do want to let you know that there are a couple alternative wins here that are fairly similar. So if you found either one of these moves, it is also winning. The first one is knight takes d5. And this is a curious looking move. It's a discovery on the queen, which is currently undefended. So if you take the knight, like let's say with a pawn, then we'll simply take the queen, and that's winning. So you cannot take the knight with a pawn. And if you take the queen, well, now the bishop-knight coordination shows, because we can play knight takes e7. This bishop is undefended. And that is actually checkmate. Yeah, look at that. So we're attacking the king, and where can he go? Nowhere. The dark square bishop is covering the rest of the squares. So very cool. So the last option would be queen takes knight. Looks fairly reasonable until you see the move c4. And the queen is actually trapped in this position. So yeah, very cool stuff. So let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so if you found knight takes d5, then give yourself a pat on the back because that is still a winning move. There is another winning move as well, which is rook takes knight. And this is one the computer showed me just because it's kind of funny, but you can afford to grab material if you want because knight takes d5 is such a strong threat as well as knight b5. So like let's say black takes our rook. Now we play knight takes d5 and it's very similar. So basically, if they take here, we take the queen. And again, if the queen takes our queen, we have knight takes e7 checkmate. And if the queen were to take the knight, we have c4. Yeah, so very difficult position for black. I'll say that for sure. There's no way out of these threats. Okay, so let's get back to our main line now. The move in the game was not knight takes d5 or rook takes h5. It was the move knight b5. So this is a funny move, isn't it? To throw the knight out like this. But it's basically, we're saying that your queen is attacked by our queen, and you need to address that, right? So it's a discovery, and again, if we take the knight with a pawn, that allows us to carry out our threat of taking the queen. So that is not possible. So you probably want to try taking the knight with the queen, but if you do that, you quickly realize the bishop's actually guarding there. So you can't do that, or you lose your queen. So after knight b5, you cannot take with the queen, and you cannot take with the pawn. So this knight is basically untouchable. So you'll probably want to try queen takes queen. But now is sort of the point of knight b5. Knight takes a7 check. So we throw in this intermezzo with checkmate. Yes, same thing. So the knight checks the king, and this bishop is just a monster on this square over here. So, okay. So knight b5 is very hard to meet. So now that we've rolled out the most forcing responses, which would be queen takes knight, pawn takes knight, and queen takes queen, now we need to look for other defensive resources. Okay, and there are a few. So we could try just moving the queen away from the threat. That's one thing to try. We could try defending the queen with b6. And I think that covers it all. Let's see. Queen b6. We should look at this move, here, and b6. Okay, so let's by process of elimination go through these. Okay, so if we move the queen away to a6, okay, we're still guarding the a7 square, so we're stopping that checkmate. But now we're in line with the bishop, unfortunately. So it would be knight d6 check. And after the bishop takes the knight, we simply take the queen with the bishop. So there's that. So queen a6 doesn't work. So let's try queen a4. So again, maintaining defense. But here we play b3. Powerful move. And we cannot take on a3. Notice that the knight is guarding that square. So we need to retreat the queen. And unfortunately, the only square not covered is that same a6 square. So again, knight d6 check. That's going to win the queen once again. So that leaves the move queen b6. If we're going to try moving the queen, this again defends the square. But now white has a really cool move. Yeah, that's the move bishop c7. Yeah, this just cracks me up because the knight that is untouchable is supporting this bishop, allowing the bishop to come in. So you cannot take with a king, and we're attacking the queen. So, the best move here is going to be to take this, and that's going to be a winning material advantage for white, no doubt. So the only move we haven't tried is the move b6. This is the move that was played in the game, okay? And it does a couple things. It defends the queen. So now if we take here, black will take here. Now that is not a very promising pawn structure for black. So this is definitely a move out of desperation. But it also does open up a square for the king. So it's probably the best defensive try as far as I can tell. And I'm not using an engine, so just using my own judgment here. So after b6, let's see. In the game, I really like the continuation here. White played the move knight d6 check. So this is not a move I seriously considered right away. I mean, we should always look at our checks. But as you've seen, the knight and the bishop are very strong together. So giving up our knight, allowing bishop takes knight, is not something that you want to do lightly. However, in this case, if we take here, now there's big problems. Okay, we can take this bishop, and now there's big threat if you don't see it. So you might be tempted to play queen takes queen, but now we have sort of a Boden's mate with bishop a6 checkmate. And I call this the bishop square of death, when the two bishops cover a square of protection like that. So, and I don't know what else. I'm trying to look at what else black could do here. If we go to a6, the bishop takes with checkmate. We could try queen a4. I think this is the only real try, just stopping queen takes queen, because even after queen takes queen, it's going to be bishop a6. But here we have a really cool move, queen b4. I really like this. So a deflection move. We're simply saying that the queen is overworked, that you need to keep defending a6 mate, bishop a6 mate. But if you do take this queen, checkmate occurs. So, and if you don't take the queen, then where's the queen going? There is no real moves here. I guess you could go here, but then we take, and again we have a nice checkmate. So I hope you enjoyed this this attacking chess exercise. I'll go ahead and go through the main line one last time, just so we can review some ideas. So knight b5 is an amazing move. You cannot take the knight, because if you do take with the pawn, we take the queen. If you take with the queen, we take with the bishop. And if you take our queen, we have an intermezzo with checkmate by taking on a7. So for that reason, in the game, b6 was played. This is probably the best try. But now we play knight d6 check, bishop takes, and now we have a new threat. So the queen's under attack and the king's under attack, essentially. And even though queen a4 is probably the best move, in the game I will tell you that queen takes queen was played, followed by bishop a6 checkmate. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And thank you for joining me in this episode of Attacking Chess. Thanks very much.